Hello, and welcome to Hedgehog Storytime, where I read my weird original fiction. The following story is part of the Mayhem Cerebrum project. Link to the playlist in the description below. Yes, you have to read them all. No, that is not a request. Welcome back for the second week of this shit. I hope this has been a fun little introductory episode to the Tea Party. I don't have a good name for these series of stories besides the Tea Party stories. That's just what I've been internally referring to them as in my head. I guess if anybody has any ideas, you fucking leave me a comment, let me know. But, yeah. Part 2. Listen, I know there's been a certain absence in the first part of the Tea Party stories. Don't worry. It won't be an absence for long. Also, speaking of which, just a small NSFW warning for this story. It's at the very end. And you can see it coming from a mile away. But if that's something that bugs you, timestamp in the description. Yeah. So without further ado, here is Horned Wolf, Part 2. The sky was beginning to darken as Kay followed Jack and their prisoner to a nondescript building about midway up the hill. Looked like they might be in for a rare Discordian rainstorm. It fit the mood rather well as Jack led them both down a flight of stairs, past a creaky metal door, and into a small concrete box. Several suspiciously red stains covered the walls and floors, but the room was devoid of any other features save a chair and a drain, both near the center. "You have a torture chamber, huh?" Kay asked. "Why am I not surprised?" "Oh, fuck," Paul Allen muttered, inevitably realizing what deep shit he was in. "Fuck."
"I almost cried when Bucky showed it to me."
Jack seemed to be misting up a little just thinking about it.
"Really had to put it back together, though. Give it that homey feel, you know. Previous hangman, the bloke before me, really didn't treat her right. You think any of these bloodstains are mine? Nah, I can make it cleaner than that. Well, okay, maybe that one is. And that one, too."
He pointed to the ceiling. "How?" Kay asked, glancing upwards and noticing the faintest traces of a very wide spread of light maroon.
"Sad bastard, he's about to find out."
Jack turned back to Paul Allen, and Kay realized that his spiel had been just as much for the unfortunate demon trembling between them as it had been for her. Without much further fanfare, Jack shoved Paul Allen onto the hard wooden chair, which squeaked horribly against the concrete. He turned back to Kay.
"Keep an eye on him for a minute. I'm going to go get my things."
Before she could protest or even make a quip, he was already gone through the door on the other side of the room. He quite obviously left it open, however, so they could both hear him rummaging around. As she stood there, as close to the exit as she could manage, Kay had to admit she was a little impressed. She'd expected Paul to be already begging and spilling his guts before Jack even had a chance to, well, spill his guts. But he wasn't doing that. He was just sitting in that chair muttering, fuck, to himself over and over. "You should probably just talk now," she pushed him, "'cause Jack's not gonna go easy on you, I'll tell you that much. All you've gotta do is tell us where Malachi is, and I can make it so that it's like this never happened." "Fuck you," was all he said, in a surprisingly harsh tone. "Suit yourself." Kay shrugged her shoulders, but didn't get a chance to say much more before Jack came back, slamming the door behind him.
"Sorry for the wait."
He grinned, dragging in a small cart behind him.
"I was considering bringing out the thumb screws, but I thought this is my first proper torture in a bloody long time, so we should probably stick with the classics."
The many knives, scalpels, and other miscellaneous sharp implements rattled as they were trundled across the uneven floor. They ended up right about eye level with Paul, and he jumped as Jack slammed a machete on top of the pile. "A bit overkill, maybe?" Kay commented. He raised one side of his upper lip.
"Aye. You never know when you might need a good machete. Great for hacking off limbs. Or tongues."
Paul Allen whimpered.
"So, unless you've got a burning desire to see some mutilation, that's your cue. The door's right over there."
Truth be told, Kay was looking for any excuse to extract herself from the situation, so gratefully took it. Jack waved her off, wiggling his fingers.
"It'll only take a few minutes."
He figured that Paul Allen would break pretty quickly. He was already shaking, after all. But Jack was surprised. A half an hour later, and he still hadn't squealed. Jack supposed he hadn't done anything permanent yet. He wanted to give the kid a chance. Plus, he needed him conscious. Yet even the cold iron around his wrists wasn't deterring him from his silence. Jack wasn't frustrated necessarily. There was a lot of fun to be had in a slow escalation, but he was confused.
You know I'm gonna have to start getting rough now.
Jack frowned, gently replacing the blood-crusted scalpel he'd been using to cut open his face. The demon didn't even respond.
Sorry, mate. I found myself a touch confounded,
he drawled, fiddling with his favorite switchblade.
Well, haven't you talked yet? I mean, what's the fucking point of getting cut up over it?
He gestured to the growing puddle of blood that was lazily working its way over to and down the drain.
I mean, I know you're a demon and all, but it's still bloody painful, aye?
Though Jack waited for a response, he still got nothing. He supposed Paul Allen's lip was pretty swollen by this point.
So what is it then? Fear? Loyalty? Malachi doesn't seem like the type to inspire either of those.
Finally, his victim spoke. You really think this is about Malachi?
Yeah?
Nah, fuck Malachi. I was just using him to claw my way up. I saw that bitch Kay tumble and thought I could do it better. No way. My bone to pick is with you cocksuckers.
What? The tea party?
Yeah, the fucking tea party. Maybe I'm in the minority when I say this, but things were way better before you guys rolled back into town. At least there was some actual law and order. Kept people like you off the streets.
Bloody terrible, isn't it?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You're just a straight-up murderer. Bake acts like he's a dumb party boy, but deep down he's the sort of guy that keeps people like you as his confidants, and that's not even mentioning that bitch. He tilted his head to the door, at least as much as he could without ripping his cheek open anymore.
Kay?
Jack frowned.
You really think she's worse than either of us?
Truth be told, he found himself a touch offended. She's got no shame. She'll tell any lie. Pretend to be anyone to get what she wants. 1 minute she's getting her ass ousted by Bake, and less than a month later she's in his inner circle. And I guarantee I know exactly what she did to get there. Jack had to laugh to himself because Paul had no idea what he was talking about. But it was curious. He never actually considered the type of person who would hate the things Kay did more than those he did. Now that he thought about it, he imagined there might be quite a lot of them. But he shook himself. Couldn't leave Paul thinking he'd softened him.
Thanks for the critique, mate.
He grinned, grabbing the biggest knife in the collection.
We'll take it into consideration.
Paul Allen braced himself, yet before Jack could so much as touch him, there came a soft yet persistent knock on the door. Jack scowled. What could the whore possibly want right now? This is going nowhere, she said after Jack closed the door behind him. The sky was really getting dark now, which left the stairwell in such a coating of inky blackness that he could barely see her face. Let me talk to him.
You think there's something you can say that I can't do with me knife?
Kay nodded. Yeah, pretty much. Though he rolled his eyes, Jack gestured her over to the door.
Then be my fucking guest.
Paul Allen glanced up, somehow managing to look surprised despite the blood loss. Most of his fingernails were gone, and there was barely an inch of him that wasn't covered in slash marks of some kind.
I guess you heard all that,
he mumbled, though a certain light still remained in his eyes. Door's not exactly thick. She shrugged. Not like it really matters. I've heard way worse from people way more important than you. He didn't respond, his eyes starting to cross a little. Loath as she was to do it, Kay grabbed his chin and forced him to look at her. You're a selfish prick, was all she said. Huh? This whole time you've been going on about spite and how you've been wronged. You've entirely forgotten about Janie. His eyes focused. Just a little. She put herself in harm's way for you, and you're going to give all that up, let Jack rip you to pieces, just because you hate us? Because if he comes back through that door, it's all over for you. And that's going to make Janie pretty upset, don't you think? He thought about that one for a second. We're not even planning on doing anything, you know? She said, we just want to make sure that Malachi doesn't try anything. What's the point in destroying someone's happiness for something so inconsequential? All I need is a location. And you'll let me go back to her if I tell you? Sure thing. Paul Allen fell silent, the only sounds his labored breathing and the dripping of his blood on the concrete. Fine, he said. Fine. He's in Dryden getting some sea air or something. There. Are you happy? I am. Thank you. Kay sighed. She really didn't take pleasure in what came next. I am also very sorry to say that your earlier assessment of me was pretty much spot on. What do you mean? Well, you see, I didn't really lie exactly. If it was up to me, I would totally just let you go. But, you see, Bake's worried that you might squeal to Malachi, so yeah. She picked up one of the knives from the cart. Sorry, boss's orders. There were no words. Not even a sound. Kay blinked, and his hands were around her throat. Shit. She'd miscalculated. She didn't think he had the strength left in him to even stand, and since the cold iron wrapped around his wrist was now touching her neck as well, Kay had no idea whether she was going to make it out of this one. "Hey, Paul!" came a voice from over his shoulder, and in surprise, Paul Allen loosened his grip just enough to glance behind him. Kay managed one breath inward before Jack cut clean through his neck with the machete. Blood sprayed onto his face before the body and head both fell to the ground with a hollow thump, though the head bounced a time or two before coming to rest, the eyes staring in blank surprise at nothing, save the two of them covered in his blood.
"So that makes it, what, twice I've saved your bacon today?"
Coughing a little, Kay swiped a bit of the blood off her face. I guess that makes us even. Jack clearly wasn't even fazed by the headless body resting between them, and Kay tried desperately to appear the same.
"Pardon?"
he asked. "You found him and killed him, and I caught him and got the information we needed. So it all evens out in the end."
"You caught him? I'm the one who did all the bloody running."
Feels really bad when someone does your job for you, huh?
Ah, fuck off.
And, on that note, she turned on her heel, trying very hard to make sure Jack didn't see her skin crawling. "I'm going to let you deal with the mess. I would like to get the blood off before it starts caking." She was almost at the door before he spoke again.
"Oi, Kay."
Pausing, she turned back. She wasn't sure she remembered the last time he actually used her name.
"You may be a whore,"
he muttered.
"but you're a damn clever whore."
Though she couldn't be sure, Kay thought that he might have been complimenting her. "And you're more wolf than mutt, even if that still makes you a dog."
"Ah, fuck."
He frowned, looking irritated. "What?"
"You remember what the whole point of this runaround was, right? For us to actually get along?"
Shit. Kay's expression matched his own as she realized just what he was getting at. The bastard got what he wanted after all.
"Dunno why. That pisses me off."
Kay laughed, rolling her eyes. "Well, at least there's one thing the two of us can agree on, huh?" The storm had begun in earnest by the time Kay stood dripping in the flat's foyer. It wasn't her apartment, which was all the way across town. Even though the rain had washed most of the blood off by now, she was not about to waltz across the city after what she'd just seen, trolley car or no. So the flat it was. Bake had handed her the key only about a day or two after she'd rejoined the tea party, despite her protestations that she already had a place. Apparently, every member got a flat just off the plaza, and there was nothing she could do about it. Well, she guessed that it came in handy for moments like these. So here she was, wet and in the dark in an empty, unfamiliar location. Kay didn't even know where the lights were. After a good pathetic minute, she located the switch and managed to pierce a bit of the gloom beyond. The flat was fully furnished, though thank God it looked nothing like a model house as she'd feared. From what she could see of the living room, most of the furniture looked like stuff you'd find in a secondhand store or inherit from some distant relative. That was good. It didn't feel as clinical that way. Maybe she'd spend the night here instead of just waiting at the rain like she'd initially planned. Kay took a deep breath, in and out, trying not to think about decapitation. It was all going to be okay. She had seen much worse, and she probably would again. She'd take a warm shower and then see if there was any tea to be had in the kitchen. She had just calmed down enough to bend down and unzip her boots when she was suddenly and unexpectedly slapped on the ass. Straightening abruptly, Kay whipped around. She relaxed as she saw who it was, and then immediately tensed again as she realized who it was. Jesus Christ! She scowled as Bake waved at her. How long have you been there?
Is it funnier if I say 30 seconds or all afternoon?
Both have implications I'd rather not think about.
So let's not then. How did it go?
He pushed off the wall and emerged from the gloom, taking a few small steps towards her. He was changing the subject, but it wasn't worth her time to call him out on it, so she just sighed instead. I got what you asked for. Malachi's hiding out in Dryden, and Paul Allen is dead. Bake's grin turned slightly more lopsided.
That's not what I meant, and you know it.
Kay couldn't believe she was about to say this. She gritted her teeth. Jack is a horrifying, greasy little creature, but he has his uses. We came to an understanding.
And you doubted my methods.
I didn't doubt your methods. We just both wanted to spite them. He leaned in, only a few inches away.
And that's exactly why it worked.
More and more, Kay was learning something about Bake. He wasn't smart. Not at all. He might have been if not for the copious drug use, though that was more than a lost cause at this point. But if there was one thing Bake was, it was clever. And that was the last thing most people expected. She may be able to lay down schemes that he'd never even think of, but when the moment came to strike, he may just be able to squirm his way out of anything she could throw at him. I'll admit, you played us like a fiddle. Let me guess, you also predicted that I'd end up here because of the rain, and you've been waiting here for who knows how long just to gloat.
To be 100% honest, I didn't even think about the rain. I figured it was going to be the blood that did it. Speaking of which, since you finally cracked this shit open, want to take the tour?
Being invited into a strange house by a strange man, what's not to love about this situation?
Ah, don't say that.
He smiled playfully and grabbed her chin, pushing it gently upwards.
We've got a history, don't we?
No, they didn't. Kay really didn't know this man at all, unless... there was only one thing he could be referring to. All right, she'd play that game. Ultimately, she didn't really think that she had an option to refuse. Hidden deep within that gleeful expression was something, just the smallest amount of something, that she didn't like. All right, why not? She sighed. Just know that no matter how much you sell it, I'm still not moving in here.
Ah, come on. There are so many more fun ulterior motives to have.
The flat wasn't too large, so it didn't take that long to see it all.
You didn't seem like the type to want a lot of space,
Bake commented. Kay almost responded that he didn't seem like the type to consider stuff like that, but decided against it. The main room was a combination kitchen and living area with a staircase to the side that led to a bedroom loft. This was ultimately where Bake ended his tour. Great, and now that that's over with, you can fuck off. Kay took a step back down the stairs.
Hold on there, Kay.
He grabbed her wrist and pulled her back to him.
Did you really think you could get rid of me that easily?
Kay's expression tightened. Thought you were being real clever saving the bedroom for last, huh? She took back all of her thoughts from earlier.
I was aiming more for charmingly pathetic.
His shark-like grin widened.
That's your type, right?
He wanted her to say it. She knew he wanted her to. But his gaze was too dangerous to assume that anything good would come from it. All she could do was deflect. I don't have a type, she scoffed.
Then what's the problem?
He asked, his arm weaving its way around her shoulder.
Like I said, we've got history already, don't we?
History? She laughed. Sure, a history of threatening to hunt me down like a dog and then psychologically tormenting me for 2 weeks.
I was flirting! I thought you were into it.
That arm that had been around her shoulder had somehow wandered its way down to her waist, where another one quickly followed it. When he was this close, the unfamiliarity really hit her. He was just too... tall. Just a little. Hardly noticeable unless she was looking up at him like this. She was sure that he could tell exactly what she was thinking. Behind those bright green irises, there was almost something accusatory in his gaze. It was an achingly familiar expression.
Why are you hesitating, Kay?
It seemed to be asking her.
Is there a certain specific reason, perhaps?
But both of them knew exactly what the answer was. Unbelievable. She scoffed. Genuine question. Have you ever considered that someone might not want to have sex with you? He tilted his head to the side.
Never once crossed my mind. But, look, if you sincerely don't want me, then I'll fuck off and never mention it ever again.
This was her out. She should tell him right now that she was not interested.
But I think we both know that you don't really want that.
Oh, yeah? And just what makes you say that?
Well, my hand has been pretty firmly planted on your ass for the last 10 seconds, and you have done literally nothing to stop me.
Ah. Right. There was that. What Bake hadn't said was that beyond that, they were pressed firmly together by this point. Yep, that was it. It was far too late now. This was definitely going to happen. As confused and anxious and almost guilty as she felt, the number one emotion running through Kay's head was disappointment at herself for just how much she really wanted it. A few odd minutes and some change later, and Bake was thoroughly railing her from behind. She was thin, but she had enough that she jiggled in all the fun places with every thrust. Oh yeah, this is exactly what he'd been hoping for. Wait, not yet, too soon. Bake paused for a second to catch his breath, enjoying the warmth of being inside her. He bent forward, pressing his chest into her back. As he squeezed her breasts, grunting slightly, he noted with satisfaction that Kay was letting out a soft moan with each labored exhale. This was the moment to bring it home. Grinning, Bake leaned down and whispered into her ear,
Hey, Kay.
Yeah? She barely managed to push the word out.
I'm getting the weirdest feeling right now. He continued, Why do I feel like we've done this before?
At the mention, Kay stiffened and involuntarily squeezed him tighter. Bake straightened, resuming his thrusting, and cackled. Oh yeah, that felt real good. He'd finally found someone fun to trade his little mind games with. Oh, and the sex was awesome too. That one without saying.